Hey there YouTube. So for this video we're going to do a quick CRUD application using FastAPI. So as you can see here, I'm using PyCharm for my IDE. Feel free to use whatever you'd like. This is just my personal preference. So what I'm going to do here is click on New Project. I'm going to click on FastAPI, and then here I'll just rename this to CRUD. I'm going to use the new virtual environment, and then I'm going to click on Create. So while this is going, it's downloading all the dependencies and things required to run FastAPI. So notice here I get a main.py, and this includes some starter code. So from FastAPI, import FastAPI, app equals FastAPI. All this is doing is setting up the scaffolding required for FastAPI to run. So there's a lot under the hood there, which is kind of way out of scope for this video, but just realize this is the scaffolding required to get the FastAPI application running. Then we've got some routes. So here we've got app.get, app.get. So basically, if you turn this on, which I'll go ahead and do now, and navigate it to that URL, 8000. So this is basically localhost, or 127.0.0.1. Navigate to the home page, which is just nothing. You'll see here we get a value of message hello world, and that's what we return when you hit that home path or route. So given that we're building a CRUD application, there's not going to be any actual web page for this. It's just going to be a simple API. So I'm actually going to go ahead and remove these. Okay, so once you've got that done, we're going to use to-do items to kind of build our CRUD application. So first thing I want to do is create just a in-memory database. So to-do db equals, and then just empty list. So every time this application starts up, we're going to have a brand new to-do database. Next, we have to figure out what it is that we want to work with. What is the data that we want to work with? So here we can say class of to-do item, and then it's going to inherit from base model. Now notice here base model is kind of with the red squigglies there, indicating that it doesn't know what it's talking about in PyCharm. So here what we can do is we can actually import this, and we're going to import from pydantic.baseModel. Now under the hood, this is giving us a lot of functionality. This allows us to send in requests and return responses using this data structure, this to-do item class. If we didn't use the base model, it wouldn't work. So after we've got the inheritance set up for base model, we're going to go ahead and add our fields. So what are the things that we want on a to-do item? Well, first I would say a title, and that's going to be of type string. And then maybe is complete, or maybe I would just put complete, that's fine too. Complete, and this will be a bool. Now, because this is acting as a database, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a simple ID, and that's going to be an int. And when it comes to users passing this information in, we say, for example, we're creating one for the first time, we'll auto-generate this ID. So I'll go ahead and just say none. So this way it just makes it optional. Okay, so once we've got that done, let's go ahead and start making out our endpoints. So first things we want to do is probably do a creation of some kind. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So at app.post, and the URL we're going to use is to-dos. And what this is doing here is it's saying, hey, accept a post request to this URL endpoint, which is just /todos. So then we're going to use our async def, and we're going to say create to do. Now you might be wondering, hey, is this async thing required? It's not. It's just async is kind of the way of the future. It's allowed in FastAPI, so might as well use it and take advantage of it. So async def create to do. Now what we want to do now is accept a request body. So what is going to be coming inside of the body in the form of JSON when we get to that part? And that's going to be the to-do item itself. So here I'll say to-do, and that's going to be a type of to-do item. And then FastAPI will recognize that this is a request body. given that there's no path parameters to confuse it with. So now what we need to do is, what do we want to do when we get that request in? Well, we want to go ahead and add it to our to-do database. And like I said earlier, we want to increment or create that to-do ID automatically. This way the user, or us in the test case, doesn't have to send in an ID. So I'm going to say to-do dot to-do ID is equal to the len of to-do DB plus 1. And that way it'll start at 1 and just kind of continue going from there. Then we're going to go to-do DB, yep, there we go, dot append to-do. And then I personally like to have like these little simple response objects, but this is kind of up to you if you'd like to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do it. So return is success, and that's going to be true. Whoops, true. There we go. Okay. And then up in here, what I'm going to do is, if you ran this code as it is, you will get a response status of 200, right? And that's okay, right? That's basically saying, hey, this was successful. I would like to be a little more specific on that. So if I want to specify a different status code, I can go ahead and put it inside the parentheses of this decorator. So I'm going to put a comma, then I'm going to put status code is equal to, and I'm going to put 201, and that's going to be a created status code because we are indeed creating this. Okay, so once we've done the creation, let's go ahead and do the get, or the read, right? The read part of the CRUD operations. So here, let's just do a get everything. So I'm going to go ahead and make some spaces here, and then I'm going to say at app.get, and this is accepting a get request, and the URL I want to use is to-dos, and then async def, and then we'll just say get to-dos for the name, and then we'll leave it empty for right now in the parentheses. And then all we're going to do here is return to-do DB. Okay, so we've written some code here, so let's go ahead and test it. So I'm going to go ahead and just restart just for the sake of that. Just out of habit, I do that. Now, the application that I'm going to be using to test with is Postman. Drag that over here. So this is Postman, and I will post a link to the download link to download this application yourself. But this is what I'm going to be using. I like having Postman separate. I do realize that PyCharm does have a built-in HTTP client, but I got used to Postman before I used that, so that's why I use Postman. It's personal preference. If you'd rather use the built-in one for PyCharm, feel free. So what we want to do now is, I've obviously built out some of these requests. So I've got the create, get, the patch, and the delete. The patch and the delete we haven't gotten to yet, but I'll go ahead and do the create. So let's just say that I'm going to go to a post request, HTTP, localhost 8000, and to-dos. Then I'm going to do the body, raw JSON, and then inside of the curly brackets that you can see here, I am typing in the title is dishes, and the complete flag is set to false. Once I've done that, I'll go ahead and send it off. And we can see here that is success is true, and we get the 201 that we were looking for. If we go back to PyCharm, whoops, come on now. There we go. We can see here that we get a log, and it says post for to-dos is a 201 created. So we were good. So let's now go ahead and do the get request. So same thing, I have the same URL. So localhost 8000 to-dos, except this one is a get request, and there's no body, right? So we can go ahead and just send off this request. And there we go. We get the list, which is the to-do DB, and then there is our to-do item. And notice here the to-do ID is 1, right? Because it is the length of the to-do DB plus 1. And since it was starting at 0, it got assigned 1. Okay. So now, just something else to add here that you could do on the GET request for all of the to-dos is query params. So something along the lines of pagination might be something that might be useful to you. So we're going to add some query params to this endpoint. So I'm going to say start colon. So I'm indicating this is an integer, and it's optional. So I'm going to say it's none equal to none. And then I'll also include an end. Int none is equal to none. Right, so I'm making two optional query params, start and end. And the reason why I'm doing that is because what if I had, just for the sake of argument, 1,000,000 to-do items, right? Well, I probably don't want to load all 1,000,000 to-do items at the same time. So this will allow me to do pagination. So I'm going to say return to-do db, and then I'm going to use splicing, and I'm going to go ahead and say start and end. And that way I only get a select number of to-do items at one time. So I'll go ahead and go back to Postman. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a bunch of these. So we'll just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So now let's go ahead and go back to the get all. And then I'm going to go ahead and tack on these query params. So I'm going to go ahead and put the question mark. And I'm going to say start is equal to, and we'll just start at 0. And then the ampersand sign, and end is equal to, and let's just say 5. So I'll go ahead and send this off. And we can see here that despite the fact that I created, I think, 10 of these, I'm only going to get the 5 back. So this is kind of one way to implement the query params, and you can see why it might be helpful given if you have a large data set to work with. Now you probably want to have some additional error handling around this, but that's kind of for a different conversation. Okay, so now that we've got that one squared away, let's go ahead and implement the delete. So to implement the delete, we're going to use the app.delete /todos. Now we need to specify which to-do item we would like to delete. So in this case, that's going to be a path parameter. And here I'm going to go ahead and add the slash, and then I'm going to add a curly bracket, and inside that I'm going to say to-do ID. So what that's doing now is it's saying, hey, accept a delete request, and the curly bracket notation is indicating that, hey, this is a path parameter, so therefore check inside the parentheses of the function for where it is. And that's what we're going to declare now. So async def delete to do, and then inside the parentheses to do ID. Make sure this matches up to what you put inside of the curly brackets, and that is going to be a type of int. So once we've got that, now it's a matter of getting the proper to do item and then deleting it. So here what we can do is we can go ahead and create a separate function to go ahead and traverse our to-do list, or to-do DB I should say, sorry, and grab the index of the item that we are looking for. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to put a pass here for now just to get rid of that red squiggle. And I'm going to say def get to-do by ID, and then to-do ID as a parameter. And all right, I'll try to stay consistent with this. So async. Now this is not going to be an asynchronous process, right? Everything I'm about to do inside of this function is not asynchronous. It is synchronous code. But for the sake of being consistent with all the other functions here being async, I'll continue to use async because in reality, you might be doing some calls outside of your application, things of that nature that might require asynchronous functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it with async for now, just to, again, consistency. So, okay, anyways. So for idx, comma, t in enumerate to-do db. Right, so I'm going to iterate through the to-do db, and I'm going to get the index and the to-do item itself. If t.todo ID is equal to to-do ID, then we're going to go ahead and return the index. And then once that is done running, I'm going to say for else raise HTTP exception, And then here it's red squiggles. It doesn't know what this is. You just have to import this. And then we want to use the FastAPI HTTP exception. And then we're going to say status code 404 because it was not found with a detail or a message of, whoops, to do not found. Okay, so we've got that one squared away. Let's go ahead and actually implement it here in our delete functionality. So here I'm going to say IDX is equal to get to do by ID and then to do ID. So I actually don't like the naming of this, actually. Let me go ahead and rename this. Get to do index by ID. There we go. I like that better. Okay, so once we've gotten the index, we are just simply going to do db.pop, and we're just going to remove whatever that index is. And that's pretty much it. What is this giving me a warning for? Oh, that's right. I have to actually do this because I used async. Okay, so because I used the async keyword here, I actually have to use the await keyword here. So basically, if this were running asynchronously, FastAPI will say, oh, okay, this is a task that might take a second, so I'll come back and check it, right? So it's waiting for it. Once it gets the response, it then saves that to index and then continues on. So to do dot pop, whatever the index that was given back after this asynchronous code has run. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that functionality. So we'll go back to Postman, and I'll do the get all. I imagine it refreshed. It did. So I'll go ahead and just create a few. So 1, 2, 3. We'll do a get all here. And okay, 1, 2, and 3. Perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and click on the delete here, and the delete is localhost 8000 to-dos/1. Right, so I want to delete the to-do item associated with ID 1. So I'm going to go ahead and send. And we can see here we got 200 and a null. I do not like the way that looks, so I'm actually going to change that. So here I'm going to say status code is going to be what do we want to do here? 204, no content. I don't want to return anything back. 204 or 202, we think. Yeah, let's just leave it as 204, no content. That's fine. And that way the user is not expecting some kind of a JSON response like we did up here. Okay, so that takes care of that. So the last thing we want to do now is a patch, right? So a patch is going to update specific fields inside of the to-do item. So let's go ahead and set that up. So at app.patch, and then here we're going to say to-dos, to-dos, slash, and same thing, to-do ID. And then here I'm going to say status code is equal to 202 accepted. Async def patch to do. And then here I'm going to say to do ID, which is an integer, right? Because it has to match up to whatever we pass in as the path param. And then I'm going to say the payload. Actually, no, let's not do that. We'll just say, yeah, that's fine, payload. And that's going to be a to-do item. Okay, so first thing we want to do is get the information we currently have. So IDX is equal to await get to do index by ID, and then to do ID is passed in. Once we've got that, we're going to go ahead and go to stored data variable equal to do DB IDX, and then we're going to use the .dict, so dict function, and then we're going to use the another variable, so stored model is equal to do item, and we're going to unpack that stored data. So what's happening here is this is getting the to do item from our make-believe database and then converting it into a dictionary. And then what we're doing now is unpacking, or unwrapping, I think is what the documentation says, that stored data into a to-do item. And then we're going to go ahead and get our updated data. So update data is equal to, and then here we're going to say payload.dict, so dict again. And then here we're going to say exclude unset is equal to true. Basically ignore the what's the word I'm looking for? Ignore the fields that don't have a value. So basically they're none, right? So in this case, if you passed in the title, for example, and you didn't include like the to-do ID, it'll ignore the ID. So update data, and then we're going to go update model is equal to, and we're going to use stored model.copy, and we're going to use the update with the update data. And then we're just going to update the to-do DB with the index is equal to update model. So basically, once we've got the stored model, we are then going to get the dictionary excluding any unsets. So basically, in the example I'm about to go through, is I'm not going to set the to-do ID, so therefore it'll be ignored. And then we're just going to go ahead and copy that stored model with updating with the update flag set so that it uses the update data to override the fields that we want to update and save it to this update model. And then we're just overriding what's currently in the database with that updated model. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and go back to Postman. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to do this over again since it reloaded. Yep, okay. So let's go ahead and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's fine. We'll get all. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and do the update now. So here we have the update. It's a patch, HTTP localhost 8000, to-dos, and 1. So we're going to update ID of 1. The body, whoops, sorry, I clicked the wrong thing there, is raw, JSON again. And then here I'm going to say dishes are updated, right? I don't know why I have that capitalized, so I'll just put like that, okay. And then we'll say complete is equal to true, right? So I'm updating both the title and the complete flag. So I'll go ahead and send it. And there's our 202 accepted. So now if I go to our get all, I will click on send, and notice here to-do ID of 1 has been the title has been set to dishes updated, and the complete has been set to true. So it was updated appropriately, and again, remember, I did not pass in the to-do ID, so therefore it would have been read as a none. It would have been ignored with the exclude unset equal to true, and that's why this is still 1. Okay, that pretty much covers like all the fundamentals as far as getting going with a CRUD API. So hopefully you found this helpful. Let me know if you have any feedback. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.